The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Underdog is giving away $15 million in WrestleMania 5. Sign up with the promo code SGPN to claim your first-time deposit offer of $2 in bonus cash on Underdog Fantasy, promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. Rhythm has the best AI picks and projections, and their football models are about to go live. Claim your 7-day free trial today by going to sportsgamblingpodcast.com, rhythmsportsgamblingpodcast.com/RITHMM. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. It is currently early Monday morning, roughly 1 a.m. Eastern Time on July 29th. I'm your host, Scott Reichel, once again going solo for the second podcast of the night. We actually just recorded the Olympic second round preview a couple hours ago. We were going to initially do this episode, the Washington Open preview, right after it. However, we realized that they ended up resuming the Atlanta Open final. So we wanted to wait for that match to end before we actually started getting into this episode. So the reason why this episode got delayed was waiting for our lock and dog picks to actually end from the Atlanta match. That got delayed by, I don't even know, like 7 hours, give or take. But they finally finished the match. And as a result, we are now live here at around 1 a.m. Starting off with the actual reminders before I get ahead of myself, I want to remind you once again to like, subscribe on YouTube. Also, a reminder, don't forget to rate and review the podcast on Spotify or Apple. So no matter how you consume the podcast, you can show support. I know we're over 400 subscribers on YouTube. Hopefully, after what happened in the Atlanta final, we got a bunch of extra guys, a bunch of extra people subscribing because, damn, we had ourselves a great tournament, and that was a phenomenal finish to the week. But don't forget, you can still support the show if you are listening to it on Spotify or Apple. Plus, a reminder, check out the SGPN merch store because we do have a lot of great Tennis Gambling Podcast merch. We have shirts, sweatshirts, and we also have mugs. A lot of high-quality stuff that's very affordable. Recommend checking that out. Plus, it's not just for the tennis show, but we also do have a lot of other great shows on the network. And the featured show for the week is actually the Sports Gambling Podcast, which launched their 32 NFL team previews. And you are looking at a bonus that's available. Each team preview does include a code word. Submit all 32 code words, phrases, and or submit the 32 code word phrase, and you could be the lucky winner who gets a $500 NFL Circa future bet. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and also don't forget to download the SGPN app. So, time to stop stalling. Let's get into the glorious Sunday that we actually had. Starting off with the lock and dog. A reminder, we also ended up having our lock and dog picks resolved from the Olympic episode a couple of days ago. Ended up sweeping those with the Olympics. We had Mensik in straight set. We had Mensik -2.5, and we had Musetti in straight sets. Both those got there. Now, for the Atlanta final, for the lock, we had Thompson. Team total over 12.5 games, a -130. That got there as the match did go to 3 sets. For the dog, we had the over 2.5 sets in the match at +125. So once again, we had ourselves another sweep. This has been an insane week or so for me, and hopefully for all of you who've been tailing the picks on the pod. We've been on absolute fire, and hopefully we keep it rolling here. But in addition to the lock and dog picks, we hit our biggest outright in the history of the pod. Nishioka to win Atlanta at 33-1. Massive. Let's go. Nishioka dropped the first set. He was in danger. He rallied. The rain delay definitely helped. There was a rain delay for multiple hours at the 4-5 game for Thompson. And then eventually Nishioka won the second set in a breaker, and he won the third set handily when Thompson mentally kind of quit when things weren't going his way early. Nishioka, 33-1. Hopefully you all tailed me on that. Phenomenal way to end the week. It would have been a little bit nicer if Musetti also cashed the 6-1, because that would have been a nice way to win 2 outrights in the same week. But we hit the lock, we hit the dog, and we hit the outright in the same match, and we also swept the other podcast for the Olympics round 1. A phenomenal day, probably the best day we've ever had in this entire history of the actual podcast, and hopefully we end up hitting some more outrights in the future. Feels great. A lot of overall bets that have been cashing for us, and hopefully all of you have been joining me in the same actual, or with the same bets. Do you want to quickly recap, though, what happened in the match? Because it was a very weird match. Anytime you have a rain delay involved and anytime you actually have a 3-set marathon, the same script as every single head-to-head matchup, basically, between Nishioka and Thompson, repeated itself again. Thompson had a shot to win it, didn't happen, and Nishioka won a thriller. That's basically every meeting, and now Nishioka is officially 6-1 lifetime against Thompson. The match was pretty simple. Thompson got off to an early start, and he got off to a good start early, and it wasn't exactly a surprise as he ended up getting a break late in the first set to take it. Then you ended up seeing him have an opportunity actually to get a. I don't officially say to win the match officially, but he had a love 30 in the 4-4 game in the second set, up a set. So he was in great shape, but unfortunately for him, he could not convert it. Nishioka battled back, and that was really the story of the match. It was just Thompson creating chances and not being able to convert any of them. Thompson had 0 breaks of serve for the last 2 sets combined, which is embarrassing because Nishioka, we know, is not a great server. If you want to actually go through the details here, Thompson converted his third break point in the first set. He had 2 break points in the 2-2 game, so he ended up converting his third break point in the first set. Since that point, he proceeded to go 0 for 3 on break points in the second set, and he ended up going 0 for 0 for 5 0 for 5 on break points in the third set. So if you're doing the math at home, that means Thompson went 1 for 11 on break points. 1 for 11. That summed up the entire match. Thompson had 16 aces, 0 double faults, and hit 71% of his first serves, and he still lost because Nishioka went 2 for 6 on break points, and that was all he needed as he got the job done there. Phenomenal match for us, and really just a phenomenal match in general if you do enjoy tennis. The funny part is that most people probably forgot the match was even going on, and they assumed that they would actually resume it the day after. But luckily for us, Atlanta has lights, and they ended up resuming it at I don't even know, 11 o'clock, midnight, give or take. So definitely nice for us, and if they woke up in the morning waiting for the match, they're in for a surprise, but nice for luckily, once again, it was a great episode that went our way in every aspect, and hopefully all of you ended up cashing the 33-1 shot. Now, the, I guess, fun part of the actual tennis slate is that we kind of have to move past it because we do have another event to preview, which is Washington, which will be a 500 event. Just to be clear, it is in D.C. It's the City Open, and if you actually look at the field, it is full of a bunch of guys that I have roasted on the show for a long time. It's like they took all the head cases that I can't stand and just merged them into one tournament, and now I got to break down the tournament. So hopefully we end up cashing another outright. 33-1 is going to be called a tough act to follow in the business, but we'll do our best. Before we get into any of the actual preview for Washington, do want to remind you once again that we are brought to you by Underdog Fantasy because this one's their underdog streaks. If you hit your first 2 pick'em entries, then you can go streaking. If you get an 11-0 run, you can win 1,000 times your money. Plus, WrestleMania 5 is live with $15 million in prizes. You can now use specials and boosts on all flex entries. I'll probably end up using one of my entries in either something tennis related, Olympic wise, or even just Olympic basketball in general, but a lot of options for Underdog for your entries. Use the promo code SGPN when you sign up to claim your special pick and a first time deposit offer of $2 bonus cash. Underdog Fantasy promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by OddsJam. OddsJam is your one-stop shop for betting for beating the sportsbooks. OddsJam uses millions of data points across every U.S. and Canadian sportsbook to show you the best value plays for your money. Their line shopping tool shows you the best price for any bet. You want to make across countless sportsbooks, not just DraftKings and FanDuel though, but also BetOnline, Bovada, Cut, and many more. You also have an arbitrage tool, which helps you find opportunities where you can bet both sides on the same prop on different sportsbooks and automatically make money. They also have a fantasy tool that features the highest EV plays relative to the sportsbook's odds, allowing you to crush sites like Underdog Fantasy. They even have a tool for finding the best sign-up bonuses. If you're interested in trying out OddsJam, you can get a 7-day free trial by using the link below. And don't forget to enter promo code SGPN to get 35% off your first month of the subscription. OddsJam.com, promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished recapping the phenomenal episode that we had regarding the Atlanta outrights. Now it's time for the actual preview in Washington. Now, to go through the recent winners here, of course, most of the star players are in the Olympics right now. So these are kind of all the stragglers who stayed behind and decided to try to play some hard courts to get ready for the U.S. Open and onward. So going through the actual recent winners, you might remember Evans won on a dream run last year and beat Greek Sport in the final. Kyrgios ended up beating Nishioka. Shout out to Nishioka once again, but Kyrgios did beat him a couple years ago in the final. Sinner beat McDonald in 3. Kyrgios did beat Medvedev and you saw Zverev beating Dimonauer and Anderson. Now, the common theme, I think, for this overall event is, one, the heat. It gets very hot in DC, so kind of similar to Atlanta. Maybe not as hot, but the point is, keep an eye on the temperatures, and players that have had issues in, I'd say, extremely hot temperatures might struggle to actually maintain their fitness over the course of this event. Something to keep in mind. For the actual breakdown, though, of the DC Open, which I've actually been to in person on multiple occasions, I'm trying to remember the exact matches I went to. I saw Kyrgios punt a match against Sandgren, and then he quit. And then I think I saw Bombry beat Monfils in the late match after that. So I actually was at this event a couple years ago with my friend. Point is, though, the main takeaway that I think is worth mentioning for the actual tournament, it involves a lot of well-rounded play. Now, I know Kyrgios is a solid server. Zverev does have a pretty good serve in general. But Evans won. McDonald made a final. Nishioka made a final. The point is, usually big serves don't translate that well to the courts here. I'd say it really comes down to consistency and trying to outlast opponents with just variety. And once again, I think consistency is the big word. So I am going to be focusing on some players that I think just have a well-rounded skill set, and I do think that's going to translate well to the courts here. Now, to go through the outright odds, now a reminder, we don't have any quarter odds for the event, so we're going to go straight into the outright. So once again, I mentioned that this is going to be full of head cases, so keep that in mind. A lot of guys at the top of the odds list who you really don't feel great about backing. So the first four guys, bear with me here. Rublev at 6-1, Tiafoe at 850, Shelton at 9-1, and Korda at 11-1. You see what I mean? Top four guys here. I have four guys that I can't stand, so we'll see what happens in this event. Khachanov, those at 11-1. Perricard is at 16-1, playing his first match since the impressive Wimbledon run as a lucky loser. Shapo's at 16-1. Fakina's at 18-1. Nagashima's at 20-1. Shang is 20-1. Shang, I'm not sure if he's actually going to play or not because he had a back issue in Atlanta, so I'm actually not sure if he's going to suit up for this tournament. Keep an eye out for that. Mickelson at 25-1, Kaboli at 30-1, Opelka at 30-1, Kekmanovic at 30-1, Thompson, fresh off of the heartbreaker against Nishioka. I'm assuming he's not going to play here, but he might. He's 35-1. Kokonakis is 35-1. And then you get into the Wolves of the world and Vukic and Nishioka actually again at 40-1. I'd be shocked if Nishioka played here, especially after the rain delay. I just don't see that happening. But if you want to go for Nishioka, to go for the back-to-back, that is 40-1. A couple other long shots that I'm not going to mention. Anyway, point is, for the actual outrights, I feel like I have to pick one of the guys that I can't stand because I do think the draw is pretty favorable for some of these head cases. And Rublev, I'm going to start with because he is the shortest favorite. Even though he didn't look that dominant in Umag, he did make it to the semis, and he did give Cerundolo a bit of a problem. It was a straight set win for Cerundolo, but there was a breaker in there. It was competitive. Rublev, though, did beat Carabelli and ended up beating Morozin in a pretty competitive pair of matches. So I do think Rublev, I don't want to say regained his form, but maybe regained some confidence to some degree, and Cerundolo was just in God mode for the last couple rounds. So I think Rublev I have to go with here. If I had to go for one actual short price favorite here, I think Rublev at 650 that I found is a decent option. To read off the draw, I do think it's a pretty favorable option. He has a bye in the first round, then either Van Asch or Kaza. Both guys have been horrible for the last couple months. Kaza, though, was really good in the hardcourt season earlier in the year, so he might have just been waiting for the hardcourt swing again. But he's been an absolute mess, and Rublev is the better player. Then you either have Shang or Rinderknech, basically. Shang might not play, and Rinderknech we watched play in the semis against Nishioka. I don't think he's very good, and I don't think that's a hot take. So the point is Rublev would be a pretty decent favorite against Kaza and against Rinderknech if that was the matchup. Then afterwards, he'd face off against either Baena, Tiafoe, Cressy, or Nishioka, who once again I don't think is going to actually play. So Rublev's draw is an absolute joke. You could argue that Tiafoe would give Rublev some problems, but I think Tiafoe's a bigger head case than Rublev is. So 650, when you have, I don't want to say a bye basically to the quarters or semis, but it feels that way. Like, it's a really weak section for Rublev. I'm curious what his quarter odds are going to be. I'll bet it when they come out. If it's not above minus like 175, if it's like 130 or something, sure, I'll take it. But the point is Rublev's draw is pretty easy. I do think he's worthy of actually taking at the 650 price. Moving on to the next outright, actually going to go with another Russian. I am going to go with Kashanov at 11-1. I am going to skip over Tiafoe, going to skip over Shelton, and I am going to skip over Korda. There actually is a pretty interesting trend, historically speaking, for this event that actually does not bode well for the Americans, which kind of caught me off guard because usually for the Washington Open, you see the Americans kind of, I'd say, overcrowd the actual, I'd say, tournament draw. But if you're actually going through the history here, only one American has actually reached the final since 2016, and that was McDonald in 2021, which I find very weird. So the point is, there's only one American that has reached the final since 2016, which I once again is kind of alarming to me, and why I'm staying away from Americans in this event. They just have not played well here in the past. But Shelton's a head case. Tiafoe is an idiot. And Korda maybe can actually be decent in this event, but he hasn't exactly played in a while. He lost in Wimbledon early to Pericard, hasn't played since. If Korda made a decent run, I wouldn't be totally shocked, but I can't trust him anyway. And I think, as all of you know, if you've been listening to the show for a while, Korda is a guy that I really never feel comfortable about backing, so I'm not going to bother. Rublev has been fine for us in the past, but the issue is his recent form. I'm hoping that something in Umag might have triggered at least some confidence, and he is on hard court. And we know Rublev is a very solid hardcore player. Point is, though, Kashanov has not played since Wimbledon either, but I think he is definitely reliable. And assuming that he's able to regain some of his form that he had earlier in the year, he has a pretty favorable draw, and I think he's in line for a deep showing. Now, he was not very good around Wimbledon time, but he has not played since, so I'm hoping the layoff actually kind of helped him reset. It's one thing if you're playing good tennis and you rest, and that kind of kills the momentum. If you're playing bad tennis and you end up just taking some time off, I kind of like it. It allows you to reset and trying to maybe regain your form. And I think Kashanov at 11-1 is a good number because you're looking at his overall draw, and he has a bye in the first round, then either Walton or Hong in the second round. He should win that one. Then either Mickelson, Bellucci, or McDonald. I think Kashanov would be a pretty hefty favorite in those. And then you're looking at who he'd play in the next round. It would either be Fekina or Kaboli. Like, he has a really good draw. And I think with that being the case, 11-1 is a good option. We know Kashanov is a very solid hardcore player. He's made the U.S. Open semi at least once. He's made the Australian Open semi at least once. He's a very solid hardcore player. And I do think that this overall path and this overall field and really the court conditions suit him pretty well. I said before, you kind of need an all-around game to succeed here. And Kashanov does have a solid all-around game. He's got a solid serve, solid forehand, solid backhand. Sometimes mentally he can check out at times, but I do think for the most part he is pretty rock solid, and assuming that he's back in form, he's a phenomenal price for his draw. So give me Kashanov at 11-1. Then we ended up jumping to a massive long shot, so we ended up going with two of the shorter option guys. We skipped everyone else because Pericard I haven't seen in a while, and I said big servers don't exactly play well based on years past. Shapo's a head case. Fekina struggled with the heat in Atlanta, so I don't really trust him here in DC fitness-wise. Nakashima's been bad. Shang I don't trust physically with his back issue, and you get my point. So I am going to go down the line, actually, and I am going to mention a guy that's in a pretty difficult draw, but I like his overall game, and I do think that it translates well to the courts here. Ironically, it's a guy that would actually face off against Pericard in the second round who beat him in Wimbledon. I like Ruusuvuori here. Now, Ruusuvuori does have a matchup against Coric in the first round. Coric, I know, is kind of threatening because he did win a 1,000 title a couple years ago. Coric has been awful for the last couple of months, and Ruusuvuori is actually favored in that matchup. So, assuming Ruusuvuori does get past Coric, because Coric has been brutal. We saw him lose to Mayotte in straight sets. He's really not in good form. I think the courts here are actually pretty favorable to Ruusuvuori, who's got a lot of power. He's pretty solid on both wings. His serve can be a bit, I'd say, up and down, but I thought he was decent on grass, has not played since. But you might remember he ended up beating Tsitsipas, though, in Wimbledon. So I thought he was in decent form, took a little bit of time off. 50-1, though, I thought was a good price. You can mostly find him at 40-1. Bet Rivers, though, did have 50-1, so I'm obviously going to take that value. He's never won a title, I'll admit it. He's made it at least one final this year, and I do think that he's a guy that, if he gets going, can definitely beat anybody based on his overall firepower. So with that being the case, I think 50-1 is a good draw. Pericard hasn't played since Wimbledon, and you wonder how he's going to play on hard court. Ruusuvuori, though, has been in pretty solid form in the matches he's played, and you're looking at Coric being really just brutal. So if he gets past Coric and he gets past Pericard, you have Thompson or Opelka. up next. Thompson might not play. He does have a bye, though, which helps him out. So maybe he'll play, maybe not, but he should be fatigued. Point is, though, his overall path's not terrible. He would have Korda potentially in the next round, but I think he can handle it, and I do think 50 to 1 is a pretty good price for a guy that I think has some upside in this overall field. It's always tricky when you're backing a guy who's never won a title before to win his first one, but 50 to 1 for his skill set on these courts, I do think is a pretty solid deal. Give me 50 to 1 as my last outright. So once again, my 3 outright picks and no quarter odds available for us. I have Rublev at 650, I have Kashanov at 11 to 1, and I do have Rusevori at 50 to 1. I think if I had to pick my favorite out of those 3, I'd probably lean to Kashanov because Rublev I still don't fully trust. Rusevori is more of a long shot flyer based on price. Kashanov at 11 to 1 for his draw. I do think these courts are really favorable to him if he's able to regain his form from a couple months ago. He's very solid on hard court, though. We know how good he can be. Give me Kashanov at 11 to 1 as my favorite choice out of the 3 for the outrights. Anyway, point is that's going to wrap it up for the outright picks for Washington. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks for the first round. Before into that, though, do you want to remind me once again that we are brought to you by Rhythm, because if you have not checked out their AI picks and props and Rhythm, you are missing out. They just hit a bunch of winners for the 3M Open in golf, and their football models about to drop. You can even customize your own betting models using Rhythm's tools. Claim your 7-day free trial today by going to sportscampodcast.com's Rhythm, sportscampodcast.com/RITHMM. We're also brought to you by Circus Survivor and Circus Millions. Circus Sports is back with Circus Survivor and Circus Millions, giving away $16 million in guaranteed prizes. Imagine the regret you'll feel if you win your office Survivor pool but didn't enter the Circus Survivor. Don't have a trip booked yet for Las Vegas for football. Ultimate Cons weekend's a great time to go. Hang out with Ryan and Sean and enjoy some of the bar events at the World's Bet Sportsbook from August 22nd through the 24th. Use promo code SGP15 to save 15% off your hotel room for sign-up weekend. Sign up in person at Circus Sports between now and September 7th. Use a proxy. Play from anywhere. We even have a deal with footballcontestproxy.com. Save you $50 with promo code SGP. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished previewing the outrights for Washington. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks. For the lock, I am going to go to a matchup that looks very dangerous on paper because we're backing a guy that has been really bad so far this season. It's a matchup between Garin and Karatsev. We are going to take Karatsev money line at minus 152. Now, a couple reasons why we're going to go with minus 152. First of all, Bet Rivers has 152. Every other book has 165. So Bet Rivers did go rogue, and they're saving you 13 cents, which I'll take every time. Now, Karatsev, I do think, even though he's been really bad this year, we know his best surface is hard court. He's definitely a solid hard court player, and I do think that the return to the hard court swing to end the year, or for the back half of the year, will do him some good. Karatsev ended up playing in Atlanta, though, last week. I thought he was fine. Ended up beating Harrison straight sets. I think he lost 4 games in the entire match, so he looked very good. And then he played against Tiafoe in the second round, who was one of the favorites in that tournament. And he did lose, but it went 3 sets. So Karatsev, I thought, actually looked pretty good in Atlanta, at least compared to how he was playing earlier for the last 5-6 months. So with the return to hard court and with Karatsev's form in Atlanta, I'm a bit optimistic on what I saw, and I do think that he should be in line for a pretty good showing for at least one round in this event. A big reason why I think Garin's a good opponent for him is because Garin has not played an ATP hard court match since the Australian Open. So he has been pretty much only doing clay events. He's been fine on clay, but it's his first hard court event in months. And with that being the case, I do think Garin should struggle to deal with the overall conditions here in Washington. But Garin, we know in general, is a clay specialist. I know he's made he made one outlier run in Wimbledon, and he had an okay run in the hard court season. I think it was a year or two ago. For the most part, though, really not known for his hard court skills, and with the lack of overall familiarity with the hard courts, I do think that you're looking at Karatsev in a very good spot to get the job done in the first round. So that's going to be the lock. For the dog, I am going to go to a matchup that I think is very unpredictable, so I am going to go with the over 2.5 sets. It's a matchup between Mayotte and O'Connell, and I am going to go with the over 2.5 sets at plus 135 on Caesars. Mayotte has lost at least 1 set in 7 of his last 8 matches, and O'Connell said, "Hold my beer, I'm going to lose a set in 8 straight matches." Now, most of them were not on hard court, I'll admit it. O'Connell did come back to hard court. He lost to Purcell in 3, so he looked decent in his first hard court match back. The point is, though, both guys are very streaky, and both guys are very, I'd say, vulnerable to serious dips in their overall games over the course of a match. And I do think with that being the case, you're looking at what should be a pretty even battle. Now, each guy is around minus 110, so you're expecting a coin flip matchup. Both guys, once again, tend to drop at least one set, and I do think you're going to see a pretty back and forth matchup between them. So give me the back and forth war. Give me the over 2.5 sets at plus 135 as my dog. So once again, my picks for the show. The lock's going to be on Karatsev money line at minus 152. Once again, on Bet Rivers, my dog's going to be on Mayotte and O'Connell over 2.5 sets at plus 135 on Caesars. That's going to wrap it up. A reminder for the next episode, we'll be back for the quarterfinals in Washington, but before that, we are actually going to get into the third round of the Olympics. So keep that in mind. We do have some Olympic stuff to get into. We did an Olympics episode before this one. So if you do want the second round picks for the men's Olympics, then you can definitely find that on the YouTube channel, the video before this one. Until next time, find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio. Until next time, you can find me on the NBA show, the WNBA show, and the MLB show. 33-1 with Nishioka. Definitely feels good, and hopefully that's the start of a bunch of other massive outrights we're going to hit for the hardcourt season. Until next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.